Right now, somewhere in your house, a light is on. You didn't think about it. You flipped a switch and the dark just left. But for almost the entire span of human existence, that option didn't exist. When the sun went down, your ancestors were left with nothing but the sky, their own bodies, and each other. So what did they actually do with those hours? The answer is far stranger and far more important than you'd expect. For most of human history, night wasn't empty time. It wasn't dead space between one useful day and the next. It was a separate world with its own rules, its own dangers, and its own strange kind of magic. Your body still remembers this world, even though you've never lived in it. Start with the obvious problem. Night was dangerous. Predators hunted in the dark far better than humans did. Early hominins had poor night vision, no claws, no natural armor, and a body built for daytime endurance, not nighttime combat. So the first thing ancient humans did every night wasn't storytelling or sleeping, it was defense. Groups clustered together, bodies pressed close, not for comfort, but for survival math. A predator approaching a tight circle of humans faced more eyes, more ears, and more chances of being spotted before it struck. Sleeping in a scattered pattern was a death sentence. Sleeping in a cluster was insurance. This is why, even today, many people feel uneasy sleeping completely alone in an unfamiliar space. Your brain hasn't updated the manual, but defense alone doesn't explain what came next. Once the group was safe, something else happened. And this is where it gets interesting. Anthropologist Polly Wissner spent years living with and studying the Juhuanzi, a foraging community in the Kalahari, and she noticed something almost nobody had measured properly before. Daytime conversation among the Juhuanzi was mostly practical. Complaints, coordination, gossip about who did what. But nighttime conversation, once the fire was lit, transformed completely. It shifted towards stories, myths, distant relatives, other groups. The kind of talk that builds a shared world instead of just managing a to-do list. Why would firelight change the subject of conversation? Wiesner's research suggested that darkness itself did the work. During the day, your eyes are busy. You're scanning terrain, tracking threats, reading faces for information. At night, in a small circle of firelight, there's less to look at. So minds turn inward and outward in a different way, toward memory, imagination, and connection. This matters more than it sounds. Stories told around fire didn't just pass the time. They passed down survival knowledge disguised as entertainment, where dangerous plants grew. Which neighboring groups could be trusted? What happened the last time someone ignored a warning? A story is easier to remember than a rule. Ancient humans didn't have libraries. They had firelight and repetition. Now here's the twist most people never think about. Fire didn't just protect ancient humans from predators, it may have physically changed the timeline of human evolution itself. Primatologist Richard Wrangham has argued, across years of research on early human diets, that the controlled use of fire for cooking transformed the energy available to the human body. Cooked food is easier to digest. It delivers more usable calories for less chewing and less gut effort. That extra energy had to go somewhere. Wrangham's hypothesis points to the brain, an organ that consumes an enormous share of the body's total energy, as one of the biggest beneficiaries. Think about what that means. The simple act of sitting around a fire at night, cooking food instead of eating it raw, may have helped fuel the growth of the very brain you're using to process this sentence right now. Night wasn't just survived. It was, in a very real sense, where part of you was built. But cooking and safety still don't fully explain the pull of the campfire. There's something else going on, something almost architectural about how humans gather at night. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe, who studied the Hadza foragers of Tanzania for decades, documented how their daily rhythms split cleanly in two. Daylight hours were for movement, foraging, tracking, gathering. Nighttime hours around the fire were for something closer to democracy. Disagreements that built up during the day got voiced at night, in front of the group, where social pressure could resolve them without violence. The fire wasn't just a light source. It was a courtroom, a classroom, and a support group, all at once, lit by the same flames that kept the leopards away. Doesn't that reframe everything you assume about primitive life? These weren't people huddled in fear, waiting for sunrise. They were running informal institutions by firelight, thousands of years before anyone wrote a single law down. So what actually happened night after night for hundreds of thousands of years? A pattern repeats across almost every study of surviving forager societies. First, the group gathers wood before dusk, because collecting fuel in true darkness is far riskier than doing it in fading light. Second, the fire is built and food is prepared, often the one hot meal of the day. Third, as the light fades and the group eats, conversation shifts, exactly as Wiesner documented, from logistics to legend. Fourth, children listen. They absorb the moral lessons buried inside the stories, the ones that would sound like lectures if spoken plainly in daylight, but land differently as narrative in the dark. Fifth, one by one people drift towards sleep, usually in stages, with someone at least partially alert at almost all times. Even rest wasn't fully abandoned to vulnerability. Notice what's missing from that list. There's no scrolling, no screens, no second source of light competing with the fire for attention. The fire was the only screen, and everyone watched the same one, together, at the same time. Can you imagine an entire community, night after night, focused on one shared point of light instead of scattered across 100 private ones? This single source of light detail might explain something modern researchers have puzzled over. Sleep scientists studying communities without electric lighting, including groups in Bolivia, Namibia, and Tanzania, found that people in these environments still don't sleep the moment darkness falls. They wind down gradually, often talking for an hour or two after sunset before actually drifting off. The firelight period wasn't wasted time before sleep. It was a necessary transition, a kind of nightly decompression chamber between the demands of daylight and the vulnerability of unconsciousness. Your body still wants that transition. It's part of why a bright phone screen an hour before bed feels wrong in some deep, hard-to-articulate way. You're getting the light without the ritual. You're getting the stimulation without the story, the fire without the circle, the glow without the group. There's a darker side to this nightly world too, one worth sitting with for a moment. Night wasn't only stories and safety, it was also the time when the unexplained pressed in hardest. Strange sounds in the brush, the shifting shapes fire makes on cave walls. Ancient humans didn't have the biological or cultural tools to explain every noise in the dark, and many researchers studying early religious behavior suggest this uncertainty is part of where myth and early spiritual belief took root. Fear, unresolved, tends to calcify into explanation. If you can't identify what's making the sound, you invent something that can. So when you piece it all together, a night in deep human history looked something like this. Defense first, drawing bodies into a tight, watchful circle. Then warmth and food. The fire doing double duty as both stove and shield. Then story, spun out of memory and imagination, doing the quiet work of teaching an entire generation what mattered and what to fear. Then, eventually, a staged and never fully complete kind of sleep, vigilance dialed down but never fully switched off. None of this vanished when humans built houses, invented locks, or wired their homes with electricity. It got buried, not erased. That unease you feel sleeping in a new place, that pull toward a screen the moment silence sets in. That specific comfort of a small group of people talking quietly in low light. Phones down, nothing to do but talk. All of it is an echo of a ritual practiced for longer than every subsequent chapter of human history combined. Tonight, when the sun goes down, you're going to flip a switch. But maybe, just once, don't. Sit for a few minutes in whatever dim light you have. Notice how your mind starts to wander toward memory instead of tasks. Notice how a conversation without a screen in the middle of it feels slightly different, slightly slower, slightly more like something your ancestors would recognize. The fire is gone. The circle isn't.